Hey, everybody, it's Nicole, your host of the 50 Conversations podcast. Now, normally this is a podcast for career changers about big career changes. I interview career changers about their big career changes, about how they made the change, how they learn new skills, and basically we talk about how we're all adapting and becoming more agile workers for the future of work. And I say normally because, as you know, we are no longer in normal times. In fact, things are downright weird these days. And so it is a little bit odd to move forward with a podcast about career changes when we have so much uncertainty ahead with our professional lives. I've been talking to a lot of people lately who have been laid off, who are anxious about layoffs. In fact, we saw last week that 3.2 million people filed for unemployment last week. Record numbers, bigger than anything that we saw in the 2008 recession. So it's safe to say that things are, well, really weird right now when it comes to careers and jobs in general. And so this is an update to talk about where we're headed on this podcast, at least for the next, let's say, 10 episodes, and how we're going to shift a little bit the content to focus more on layoffs and preparing for layoffs and really building a foundation for people who have been laid off. So that actually makes a great segue into my own story because I have also just been laid off. Now, for those of you that are regular listeners, you know me as the author of the book Punched Out in the Face: How to Upskill, Change Careers, and Beat the Robots. And it's a book that is designed to upgrade career advice for the future of work and really help us become more agile, more flexible workers, help us build new skills and, make change in times of workplace transition. And it's still a very relevant book for what's happening right now. The problem is that authors don't exactly get big checks anymore. So I didn't get this big check to publish my book. In fact, I didn't even go the traditional publishing route. And that means that over the course of the last year and a half, I've actually had a job that supported me while I wrote the book and then after I launched the book. And though I do trainings and keynote talks, which again are on hold right now thanks to our global pandemic, I've had this job in order to support myself. And the job was as a conversation designer at an artificial intelligence startup that was based in San Francisco. I worked remotely from my home in Portland, Oregon. And a conversation designer is one of those hybrid jobs. There are these new jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago. And in this job, I basically used my skills and background in user experience research and writing to make their chatbot better. So I worked across teams. I worked on the artificial intelligence team and with machine learning engineers to understand how the chatbot work and then make recommendations on how to make it better, looking for errors in the algorithm, and then also making recommendations on the language side to make the chatbot sound more human. So it was a very, very cool job. I loved that job. But I was also a contractor. And with startups, this was a high growth, fast paced startups. And in times of transition, contractors are definitely the first to go. And about 2 weeks ago, we had an virtual all employee meeting. And let me tell you what, if your company ever does an emergency all employee meeting, you know layoffs are about to go down. This is not my first layoff situation. I've been on both sides. I've been on the side where I'm the employee that stays. I've been on the side where I'm the employee that lays off. But I do know that every single one of them starts with an all employee meeting. So if that happens, I don't know. Uh, Buckle down because something's about to hit in your company. So that's what happened in our case. This case, it was all virtual because this company is based in San Francisco, so they were already on work from home orders. And so it was an interesting experience to watch it go down virtually. It was very awkward. I think layoffs in general are pretty awkward, but when you do it virtually, man, that's a whole other level of awkward. So that happened about 2 weeks ago. There's no hard feelings there. Layoffs feel personal, but they are a business decision. And like I said, this isn't my first one. So in this case, it was like, well, shit, we're laid off. Time to figure out the next step, right? If this is your first layoff, it can feel a lot more painful. If I'm also in a very privileged position in that my health insurance, I am married, so my health insurance actually comes from my partner, and so I don't have to stress about that. For those of you that have been laid off, that either are the primary breadwinner for your family, or maybe you um, are losing your health insurance, I feel for you. It is a much more stressful situation to be in, and I want to recognize that right now. Um, so I have just been laid off, which means I've taken the last 2 weeks to really think through a lot of, well, my professional life, my personal life, being on a stay at home order and social distancing from all my peers and friends really makes you reflect a lot. And so I've kind of spent that time thinking about this podcast and my work with people and helping people understand the changes that we're going through in the workplace. And I've decided to really shift things right here in the middle of this podcast. Now, this podcast was built actually from an exercise in my book. If you've read my book, there's a section called 50 Conversations where it's for people who are trying to figure out what career path they'd like to take. And it's an exercise where I tell them to go talk to 50 people about their career paths and their backgrounds. And that's really what this podcast was meant to do, was explore people's backgrounds and explore how they made change. And I'm going to interrupt that theme because, well, I'm the podcast host and I can. But what I really want to do now is actually pivot and actually talk more about layoffs and talk about how to build a foundation once you've been laid off, and how to move forward in times of job insecurity and job uncertainty and career uncertainty. Um, and the way that I'm going to do that is this: the next 10 episodes or so are going to break down the layoff experience and talk about how to get back on your feet. We're going to cover things, everything from the strategy you should take to finding out what path is right for you. For some of us, we may decide that we have to get a job right away just so we can pay bills and have health insurance. For others, we might decide this is a turning point. It's time to learn a new skill, or maybe go back to school, or take an online course, or do something and take a pause. Or some of us still might have some extra free time to be able to, do something a little bit more in depth, maybe a full career change. And then some of you might be doing a combination of all of that. As someone right now who has a kid home, I know that I don't necessarily have a lot of free time. So I want to recognize that there are going to be different paths for different people, but I'm going to cover those paths. I'm also going to talk about learning new skills. So, how do you incorporate learning into your day? The practice of slow learning, that is, finding time to learn something new as escapism during this time of kind of huge media headlines that kind of, scare us. And so I found learning to be a great escape. So I'll be talking about learning. And then also, I'll talk a little about my own strategy going into a layoff, or excuse me, coming out of a layoff, and my own approach to finding new work, because I too would like to work. So I'll cover all of that in, let's say, the next 10 episodes. And then I'm also going to have conversations with people who are adapting to our world of work right now. And I mean right now, the people that are finding themselves working from home. Maybe they are frontline workers. Shout out to all the frontline workers right now, whether you're in healthcare, you're working in the gig economy, doing Instacart or driving people around, or you're working in the stores as cashiers. A lot of people are working without the ability to have protective gear. And I just want to shout you guys out and thank you for all the work you guys are doing. So I'll be hopefully talking to some of them to get their perspective on things. So that's where we're headed for the next 10 episodes. And I hope you're on board for it, because I'd love to share it with you. My goal really is to help those of you who have been laid off, give you a foundation, give you structure, and give you a path forward, so we can get through this really together. And I haven't been a career coach for the past 4 years. I used to be a career coach. I had made this shift and really put all my advice into a book. But now I'm going to put my career coach hat back on for these episodes and really talk to you as if I was your career coach and help you through these times of uncertainty, and ideally get you back on track either with a job or career to the best of our ability right now, because again, uncertain times. Now, one thing I'll leave you with is what I've been saying all the time lately, is that everything is weird. Actually, the other day I was on a walk with my kid, because that's what you do, and you walk your kids. And there was a woman who I passed, and I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she said, "Oh, everything's weird." And I laughed, because that is exactly what I've been saying to all my friends and family, and even on business calls. Everything is weird. And it is what it is, right? That's where we're at. And so everything is weird right now, but I'm going to change things up a bit and hopefully get through this weirdness together. So, hope you're on board. If you are on board, put me in your ears on the weekly. I'm going to be releasing episodes on a weekly basis, fitting in these episodes on my child's nap time, which is where what I'm doing right now is recording this on my child's nap time. Shout out, by the way, to all the working parents out there who have kids at home. It's one hell of an adjustment. So, all right, guys, I'm wishing you all the safety, all the health, and love to all your loved ones, and practice safe social distancing out there. And I'll see you again very soon.